someone has been watching you quietly, not in a strange or threatening way, but in a way that feels almost impossible to explain. You may have noticed it already, a glance that lingers longer than normal, a presence that seems to observe you without stepping closer, a feeling that someone is aware of you, even when they say nothing. At first, you might think it means nothing, just coincidence, just curiosity. But Carl Jung believed that human behavior is rarely random, especially when it comes to the quiet movements of the subconscious mind. And when someone watches you from a distance, there's often something far deeper happening beneath the surface. Something psychological, something emotional, something they themselves may not even fully understand. Because distance does not always mean disinterest. Sometimes distance appears precisely when feelings become too powerful to ignore. And what you are about to understand may completely change the way you interpret these silent moments. Because according to Jung's ideas about the unconscious mind, when someone observes you quietly from afar, it often reveals an inner conflict taking place inside them. A conflict between what they feel and what they believe they should feel. Before we go deeper into this, take a moment and reflect. Has someone ever behaved this way around you? Someone who notices you, but rarely approaches. Someone who seems aware of your presence, yet remains strangely quiet. If that situation feels familiar, then this message may resonate with you in a way you did not expect. Welcome to the shadow self. If this message resonates with you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the deeper meanings behind human behavior. Because once you understand the psychology behind these silent actions, you begin to see human connections in an entirely new way. Now, let's begin with something important. Most people believe that when someone keeps their distance, it means they feel nothing. But psychology suggests the opposite is often true. When emotions are simple and comfortable, people move closer easily. They talk freely. They express themselves without hesitation. But when emotions become complicated, people often step back instead. Carl Jung spent much of his life studying the hidden forces inside the human mind. He believed that every person carries two versions of themselves: the conscious self, the version they show the world, and the shadow self, the hidden emotions, fears, and desires they struggle to accept. Sometimes, when a person encounters someone who triggers powerful emotions, their shadow self becomes active. This is where things become complicated, because the connection may feel deeply meaningful, but also deeply unsettling. And when the mind feels both attraction and resistance at the same time, distance becomes the safest solution. So instead of approaching, they observe. Instead of speaking, they remain silent. Instead of revealing their feelings, they watch quietly from afar. This behavior is not always intentional. In many cases, the person watching you does not even fully understand why they are drawn to you. They simply feel it, a subtle pull, a quiet awareness, a sense that your presence stirs something inside them, and that feeling can be difficult to face. Carl Jung once explained that the most powerful emotions often come from parts of the psyche we do not fully understand. When someone encounters a person who activates these deeper layers of the unconscious, it creates psychological tension. The mind begins asking questions. Why do I feel this way? Why does this person affect me? Why do they occupy my thoughts? These questions are not easy to answer, and when the mind cannot find clarity, it often chooses distance. But distance does not erase the feeling. In fact, Jung observed that when emotions are suppressed, they often grow stronger. This is where one of his most famous insights becomes important. What you resist persists. When someone tries to ignore or suppress their feelings, those emotions do not disappear. They remain in the subconscious, quietly growing stronger over time. This explains why someone may continue to notice you, even if they never approach, why they remain aware of you, even when they try to focus on other things, because the mind cannot easily dismiss something that has touched the deeper layers of the psyche. You might even sense this energy yourself. Perhaps you suddenly think about them without any obvious reason. Perhaps you feel their attention when they are nearby. Perhaps there's a strange emotional tension between you that cannot easily be explained. Jung believed that when two people affect each other on a deep psychological level, both individuals are changed by the encounter. He once described human connection in a simple but powerful way. When two personalities meet, it is like mixing two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This transformation often happens silently, without dramatic conversations, without clear explanations. It unfolds slowly inside the subconscious mind, and sometimes watching from a distance becomes part of that process, because observation allows the mind to study what it does not yet understand. The person watching you may be trying to make sense of their own feelings, trying to understand why you affect them, trying to determine whether the connection they feel is real or simply a passing emotion. But often, it is neither simple nor temporary. Instead, it becomes something deeper, something that continues quietly beneath the surface. And this is where the inner conflict begins. On one side, they feel drawn toward you. On the other side, something inside them resists that pull. It could be circumstances. It could be fear. It could be the life they have already built. Or it could simply be the realization that acknowledging the connection would change things in ways they are not ready for. So instead of acting on their feelings, they remain in observation, watching, noticing, trying to keep control over emotions that feel unpredictable. And this internal struggle is rarely visible to others. From the outside, they may appear calm and unaffected. But internally, the mind is working constantly, thinking, questioning, replaying small interactions, wondering what your presence means, because the unconscious mind recognizes meaningful connections long before the conscious mind is ready to admit them. And when the unconscious recognizes something important, it does not easily let go. This is why certain people appear repeatedly in our thoughts, why certain encounters leave lasting impressions, why some connections feel strangely unfinished. Jung believed that many human relationships exist not simply for companionship, but for psychological awakening. Certain people enter our lives to reveal parts of ourselves we have not yet discovered. They reflect hidden aspects of our identity. They awaken emotions we have ignored. They challenge the image we have built about who we are. When someone affects us in this way, the mind becomes fascinated, because encountering such a person feels like discovering a missing piece of ourselves. But that discovery can also be uncomfortable, because it forces us to confront truths we were not prepared to face. This is why distance sometimes appears in powerful connections, not because the feeling is weak, but because the feeling is too significant, too revealing, too transformative. The person watching you may sense that your presence touches something important within them, something they cannot easily ignore. but also something they are not yet ready to explore fully. So they remain at a distance, quietly observing the emotions that arise whenever you appear, trying to understand what this connection means for them. And during this process, something else begins to happen. You start to change as well, because meaningful encounters rarely affect only one person, even if the interaction is minimal, even if words are few, and even if the connection remains unspoken. Something shifts. You may find yourself becoming more aware of your emotions, more aware of your intuition, more aware of the types of connections that feel genuine, and those that feel empty. This awareness is part of psychological awakening. Carl Jung believed that the purpose of many relationships is not simply romance or companionship. Sometimes their purpose is growth. They push us toward deeper self-understanding. They challenge old beliefs about love and connection. They reveal emotional depths we did not realize existed. And when that happens, both people begin transforming internally, even if neither of them speaks about it openly. The person watching you from a distance may be undergoing that transformation right now, quietly questioning their feelings, as quietly recognizing that something about you feels meaningful, but also quietly struggling with what that realization might mean for their life. This stage of inner conflict can last longer than people expect, because the mind moves slowly when it is processing something important. People often need time to understand their own emotions, time to decide whether they are ready to acknowledge what they feel, time to determine whether the connection aligns with the path they are currently walking. And during that time, distance remains. Observation continues. Silent awareness lingers. But silence does not mean absence of emotion. Often it means the opposite. It means the emotions are significant enough to require careful reflection. Carl Jung believed that true psychological growth occurs when individuals face their inner conflicts honestly, when they stop avoiding the parts of themselves they have hidden, when they acknowledge both their desires and their fears. Eventually, every person must confront this moment, a moment where the unconscious truths within them become impossible to ignore. For some people, that moment leads to courage. They begin speaking more openly. They allow themselves to explore what they feel. They move closer to the connection instead of observing it from afar. For others, the opposite happens. They retreat further. They choose safety over transformation. They return to familiar routines where their emotions feel easier to control. Both responses reveal something important. They reveal the direction a person chooses when faced with emotional truth. And this is where your role becomes clear. You are not responsible for forcing their realization. You are not responsible for convincing them to understand their feelings. Psychological growth must occur naturally. Each person must reach that awareness on their own. Your role is simply to remain authentic, to continue growing, to continue living according to your own inner truth. Because the most powerful connections do not require chasing. They reveal themselves through time, honesty, and self-awareness. If this connection is meant to evolve into something deeper, it will do so when both individuals are ready. And readiness rarely arrives suddenly. It develops slowly, through reflection, through emotional growth, through the gradual realization that certain connections cannot be ignored forever. But even if the connection never becomes something more, its meaning remains. Because every meaningful encounter leaves a mark on the psyche. It expands awareness. It deepens emotional understanding. It clarifies what truly resonates with the heart. Carl Jung believed that the ultimate goal of human development is individuation, the process of becoming fully aware of who you are, understanding your emotions, accepting your shadow, living authentically rather than according to expectations. And sometimes another person becomes the catalyst for that process. They awaken parts of you that were waiting to be discovered. They challenge you to see yourself more clearly. They inspire deeper reflection about the kind of connections you want in life. Whether they remain close or distant, their presence has already contributed to your growth, and that growth is something no one can take away. So if someone watches you quietly from a distance, do not immediately assume it means nothing. Sometimes it means they are trying to understand something powerful within themselves. Sometimes it means your presence has touched a deeper part of their mind. Sometimes it means a quiet psychological transformation is taking place beneath the surface. But regardless of what they decide, your path remains your own. Your awareness continues to grow. Your emotional clarity continues to deepen. And the more you understand yourself, the more naturally the right connections will appear in your life. Because in the end, awareness changes everything. Once the mind begins to see clearly, it can never return to unconscious living, and that quiet awakening inside you may be the most meaningful connection of all.